all read. For the year ended June 30th, 2018. The report is available for the public on the finance webpage, which is, it's under financial reporting, so I wanted to make sure the public was aware of that. I'm going to present a brief overview of the financial statements, and then we'll turn the presentation over to Eddie Burke, who is the audit partner with Cherry Beckert, and he will present the reports of the audits. And all the audit reports are actually found in the document. After I go through some summary information, both Mr. Burke and I will be glad to answer any questions that you have. The report is divided into several sections. The introductory section includes a letter of transmittal to the board, so it's a letter to the board and to the citizens of New Hanover County, and it provides a brief overview of our school system, including major initiatives and financial and budgetary controls. The financial section begins with the report of independent auditor, followed by management's discussion and analysis. We refer to that as MD&A on page 4, and it provides a good summary of the financial statements. And I did want to highlight a few items from the financial section that I think will be of interest to you. The first thing is the difference between the government-wide statements and the fund statements. The government-wide statements are found on pages 15 through 17, and there's just 2 statements with that. The fund statements are 18 through 30. But our accounting system is set up by funds, and the fund statements provide a short-term view of the activity that happened during the year, as well as the balances at year-end. The government-wide statements provide a long-term view, including capital assets that we don't normally report in our fund statements. We just report those at year-end. The debt for our capital is actually on the county's books, so we're showing the assets without the debt. But we do include long-term liabilities, more of which show up this year than have ever shown up before, so I did want to explain that to you. This year there was a major change implemented in governmental accounting standards that requires us to report the long-term liability associated with other post-employment benefits for the retirement system. So in 2015, we included the pension liability for the first time. So anything that is considered unfunded by actuaries for North Carolina who have determined that as a state for the retirement system as a whole, if the pension was not funded for what it will need to be for our current and future employees, current and future retirees, that liability shows up on our statements since 2015. Currently, that liability is about 90% funded, so it's not quite as much as an unfunded liability. The other post-employment benefits are for mostly health care, but also disability, but that is only about 10% funded. And so that's a huge liability that is really determined by the state, because the state decides how much our retirement contributions are. But it has to show up on the employer's books. And so that change had a pretty significant
impact. So what they've done now is they've taken a state liability, pension fund, health fund, and forced the local districts to show it on their books. Right. Which, because the state pays pension funds and the state pays teacher medical once they retire. Those have been state liabilities, but because of the change in the auditing rules this year, we've been forced to report that state debt on our books, and that's why there's that significant difference.
So it's not a state change, it's a national change, but it's more of, for the first time, that's going to be showing on all of our financial statements. And it changed a positive net position of $237 million at the end of 2017 to a negative net position of $159 million. So let me remind you, this is just the long-term liability. The state legislature will determine contribution rates to make sure that, over the next several years, funding is accumulated to cover this debt. But the actuaries wanted the public to know, and the government officials to understand that debt better, so they required it to be on financial statements. Now that it is going to be reported, hopefully we'll move a little faster towards reporting it, but that'll also be a budget issue for you, because one of the reasons the retirement rate has continued to grow so high in the last few years is because we're trying to deal with this from a statewide basis, the unfunded liability for the pension and the benefit. So it doesn't really, it certainly affects us. It doesn't affect our day-to-day operations, but it potentially will affect the retirement rate contributions in the future. So that's something to think about. Questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
What do you mean by it'll affect the retirement rate contributions? You mean on paper or actual?
So what happens is for every dollar we pay in salary, because even we have multiple funding sources, but the state for all our employees determines how much we contribute for all employees into the retirement system, so whether state, federally, or locally paid. Currently, that contribution rate is 18.86%. So for every dollar of salary, we pay 18.86% into the retirement fund. The employee themselves pay 6%. And that rate has varied from, over the last 10 years, I think it's probably grown 6%. You know, it was in the 11, 12% area, and it keeps going up and up. So because the healthcare costs have gone up so much, and they're trying to get a handle on how this affects retirees. One of the changes that they have made is that employees hired after 2021, I'm looking over Dr. Welmers to make sure I have that correct, they will not be eligible for health care when they retire. That is a change the state made last year, but it has a future impact. So employees that have hired up until 2021 will have health care upon retirement, but if you're hired after that date, they won't. But this is one of the reasons. So it's really, I think it's on here just so that we have this conversation and that everybody understands it, but it's a scary number. It won't affect our day-to-day operations, and I just wanted you to sort of be aware of the difference between that and our fund statements, which is much more about, you know, what's in our bank account and how we're doing overall in our operations, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. So once I've gotten what I would say is the bad news out of the way, that's probably the worst news. There's a little bit more bad news, but it's not too much bad. The governmental fund balance at June 30th was $29.2 million, which is $3.4 million less than last year, but that was intentional. The board made a decision to try to appropriate more of that and get that balance down, you know, during the budget process. But then we had a hurricane, and so what we also have to report is anything that we have sort of obligated or budgeted in the new year, which reduces the fund balance. And so the restricted part of fund balance is $13.4 million is restricted for current year operations. $7.9 million of that is due to hurricane repairs. So we do hope to recover some of that, most of that, hopefully from insurance and FEMA. Other restrictions include carryover of grant funds, unbudgeted school funds are also in that number, and any required reserves. So that leaves an unassigned general fund balance of $7 million, which is a little bit lower than we're used to seeing. That represents a 55% increase over the prior year, and is now 2.7% of the total governmental expenditures. But keep in mind, the reason we had the fund balance is for things like this. So we were very fortunate that we had it so that we could, we didn't have to wait to move forward with those repairs. We could go ahead and do it and not have to wait until we had funding. So the other couple of items that I wanted to mention is the state funding increased 2.5% last year, while local current expense increased 3% because we've had increased funding from both state and local sources, and we're very appreciative of that. The total governmental expenditures decreased by $2.4 million, but that's because capital is part of the governmental expenditures, and as we implement the bonds, some years we're spending more than others. So we spent a little bit less last year than the year before. Following the financial statements are the detailed notes and the required supplemental information. If you want to really dig into the details of all this pension and liabilities I mentioned, all that's in the notes and in those supplemental schedules. So I'll let you review that and let me know if you have any questions. There's also a statistical section that includes 10 years of comparable financial information. And the operating statistics that I thought you might care the most about are on page 119. And that includes the operating expenditures totaled $257.8 million last year. And which is our state, local, federal, and other restricted funds that employ, you know, that's most of our operating funds. That doesn't include the Child Nutrition Enterprise or the capital outlay. Our per pupil expenditure and that's with those same funds was $9,936, representing a 2.8% increase over the prior year. So, all that said, at this time I do want to take a moment to thank the entire finance team for their hard work and dedicated service throughout the year. Specifically, I would like to recognize our finance director, Rhonda Turner, who is here. for her preparation of this report, and I couldn't get her to stand up here and explain it to you, but she prepared it. And her coordination of the audit process along with Nancy Braswell, our internal auditor. And we're also very appreciative of the expertise and support provided by the audit team from Cherry Beckert. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Burke. He'll come forward, and he will review the audit and compliance reports to go through this presentation with you, and then we'll be glad to answer any other questions you have. Thank you.
That'll be the most complicated part tonight, figuring out how to turn the slides. Good evening. It's great to be with you tonight. What I would like to do is go through just a couple of things. Mary Hazel did a very, very nice job, I think, summarizing what the major part of the changes were this year in relationship to GASB 75. What I'd like to do is just introduce who the engagement team was that worked on the audit this year. Also, just highlight very quickly what we are responsible for as your external auditor. And then I've got one slide that sort of highlights the entire results of the audit from our perspective. And then I'll open it up to questions with some summary, and then be happy to answer any questions you have at that time. First, I did serve as the engagement partner. Lonnie Keogh was the senior manager that assisted and ran a lot of the audit, and then assisting her was Mackenzie Palmer and Albert Ong. I can't pronounce his name sometimes. He was the staff accountant that helped out on the engagement. When you hire an external auditor, we basically have three primary roles when we do an audit. First is to make sure that we perform the audit in accordance with the standards that apply to you. You basically have three criteria that we have to follow. The first being the government auditing standards, where we come in and we actually look to see whether or not you're complying with the general statutes in North Carolina that apply to you. And the other two has to do with the compliance, and that's primarily over the federal and the state dollars that you administer. Our whole audit is built around compliance with those standards. The second piece of this, when we do our work, we issue opinions. That is the report that's in the financial statements that the users, including yourself, goes to, where we're basically putting our name on the line saying we believe the information can be relied upon. And then finally, from a communications perspective, there's specific guidance where we have to discuss certain things to the oversight body on an annual basis. We do that in a written letter, and it covers from whether or not there are any adjusting journal entries, any major changes in accounting policies. GASB 75 is reflected in that letter, whether or not they were in it, what the significant estimates were that was reflected in the financial statements, and things along those lines. So that is all part of your reporting package. The highlights this year, you received 4 opinions. You received an opinion on the financial statements, which is where we are opining on the numbers that are in the financials. The second report is the Yellow Book. We call it and refer to it as a Yellow Book report. That's where we are opining on your compliance with North Carolina general statutes. And then the state and federal single audit, there are 2 additional opinions where we are opining on you following and administering the federal and state dollars in accordance with the requirements. And just a note, you had a very good presentation on Head Start. That was one of the programs that we looked at this year. All opinions were unmodified or clean. That's the opinion that you do want. We found the internal control environment to be effective. We basically go through and spend a lot of time looking at the control environment, not only on the financial statement piece, but also the grant side of things, making sure you have well-documented procedures, they're effective, and they're operating as described, and we found them to be doing that.
We've got some new board members, so can you explain what you mean by unmodified?
Unmodified. I can't say I can really explain why it's called that. We refer to it as a clean opinion. How about that? That's basically an opinion where we're saying that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. How about that? Is that clear enough? mean, that's the opinion that you want. It's a clean opinion. We audited 7 programs, 2 federal and 5 state. We found the control environment to be effective and that you were administering those programs in accordance with requirements. And there were no adjusting journal entries, no past adjusting journal entries. Basically what we got from admin of the finance staff is what we pretty much ended up opining on. The biggest challenge this year was the hurricane that hit right in the middle of the audit. That sort of put everything back a little bit. I will say your department pulled together, and I think they did a great job with all the obstacles that they were dealing with during that period of time to get everything issued when it did get issued. In closing and summary, you did get clean opinions. I mentioned that with no journal entries, the control environment, like I said, was working as intended and effective. No significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses. And I would also like to reiterate the cooperation that we received during the audit process. I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort, a lot of coordination, especially with a hurricane hitting the way it did, putting everything back a little bit, but I think we got to a good point in a timely manner. With that being said, that concludes my comments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Yeah, Mr. Burke, how many school systems does your firm audit each year?
Excess of 20.
Okay. And for the record, how would you rate New Hanover County Public School System?
Very good.
That's excellent, and that's a credit to our administration, so thank you, everybody.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number B, new webpage, Appendix F, Dawn Brinson. There is no appendix.
Hello.
Hello.
I appreciate the opportunity to share with you where we are in the implementation of our new website. We got to this point, decided to move to a hosted service versus just internally doing it because the software we were using was out of date, so we had to we're looking at purchasing new software. The skill set required to constantly update the websites for the schools and the departments was getting more and more complicated, and it's skill sets that typically our staff does not have at the schools or in the departments. So what we chose to do is we reviewed multiple hosting services and go to a service where the schools and the central office staffs just have to focus on content and not page layout and design and all that. I'm very pleased with the way it's going. My notes. It's a much more professional look, I feel. I feel it kind of brings us as one big school system versus a lot of separate little schools and departments. I'll go over a few sections. So what you're looking at now is a sample of what the home page would look like. It is a responsive site, so basically depending on the size of your screen, whether it's a tablet, a phone, big monitor, small monitor, it'll adjust to fill up the page, okay? So at the top, we have the ability to put pictures. We'll have the district news, calendars, and you can always get to previous stuff by clicking on the more news or more events. We then have, up here, we have headings. It's information about us. We have superintendent, administration, some of the same headings that we've had before and you've seen. And then we go into dividing it into divisions. I did click on, let's see, public relations. This is a sample of what a division site would look like. It's much cleaner than what we've had before. It's a lot easier to read. As far as screen readers and people with disabilities, it makes life a lot easier for them. The vendor we're working with has been working with our color contrast to make sure that we are in compliance with what the requirements are. I'll show you the Board of Education page. Okay, so this is where we are at so far with your site. It's very similar to what you're used to with the agendas and notes. You will have a board portal, much like you do now, that you will log into to get to your confidential information. And then to get to schools, We are working on, we are working on the school sites. We have some high school students that are doing internships through CTE that are working with us. They are moving all the content over from the existing site to their new sites, and then we'll bring in people from the schools, the webmasters at the schools, to come in and do the manipulation and kind of making the page layout the way they're wanting it. So here is a sample. We've worked with the schools over the summer to get high-quality logos done, so that way in any kind of brochures or publications that Ms. Quattlebaum's working on, we all are using the same logos with the same colors, and it's a good quality. They will, much like the district, they'll have school news that they can put on here and their own upcoming events. They'll have their own items of interest they can put down here, as well as links to the district site. They'll have their faculty and staff pages, and then resources. And some of these links aren't active yet because we are still working on it, okay? Well, we decided, oh my goodness, up top here, we figured registration was a topic that it's very hard for people to get to. One complaint we've heard, too many clicks to get to stuff. So we're trying to make that process easier. So we included a link for registration right there up top for new parents, either kindergartners are moving in so they can get to that information quickly. We also, under quick links, have information for people looking for employment, so that's easy to find, and testing. So we are still in the process of converting and bringing stuff over. We're going to start providing training for our school webmasters and our department webmasters this month. We don't have a go live date yet. We're working on that. Once we pick one, we will be working with Ms. Quattlebaum to kind of do a big news release for it. And we're also going to be having a staff portal, so that way information that's just for staff that really is not necessarily for public, it'll be an easier place for them to find that, because that's the other thing we're hearing is it's taking them too hard to find, forms and stuff that they have to turn in. So our goal is to make it much easier to find resources. Okay. Any questions?
So on the school-based website, who will be making those changes when they need to?
Each school has identified a webmaster, and then they are the ones that will be updating the content. What's nice is with it being completely web-based during the summer when that person may not be working, there could be somebody else at the school site who can also have access and can make those changes. Because the big changes over the summer are employee changes and names, and they'll be able to make sure that takes place.
What about for all of the ancillary groups, the committees? How are they going to be linked onto the main page? Like for ACEs, for example?
I am not sure. We are still working on some of that. I know we've got under the board section, we have all the board committees listed underneath there. We are working with each of the departments to figure out the best places. There's also on the home page, this is another thing, a feature of this site. See how this is coming up? This is about the survey that you guys did on Monday. So we have the ability to have this pop up, the very first thing that they see, and then they're able to, we can change it where it pops up every time they go to a different page, or it just pops up one time and you can close it and it goes away. We'll be able to do that with weather and other kinds of announcements. So we will be able to, from this main page, be able to put under community different things. That might be a good place where the ACEs would go. It's going to be a work in progress. Once we go live, I'm sure there'll be things that we'll need to change to make it easier for people to find.
I think this is great. I know I've long been, as you know, whiny about the web pages, and I think this is a wonderful change. I really like the look of this. It looks, as you said, a lot cleaner, a lot brighter, a lot less cluttered initially when you see it. So yeah, I think this is great. Really good work. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
What is the timeline on this?
Initially, we were planning to have it go live at the end of January, but that was pre-storm.
Oh, yeah.
So we are, like I said, we're starting to do training now with the schools. The little fellows that are working with us to convert the school information over, they work less than 7 hours a week, so we're kind of working with them. But it's a great experience for them because they're getting that internship, and it's a great experience for us to be able to work with the students and give them that opportunity. So it's taking a little longer than we wanted it to, but I'd rather take the time and let it be right before we kind of go live with it. So I will let you guys know ahead of time once we set that date. Okay, anything, questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to item number C, change order report, Appendix F1, Eddie Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As it's stated, each year in accordance with the North Carolina General Statutes, we bring a change order to the Board of Education for information. The change orders listed are on projects that the board has approved. They include the contractor's name, project name, original contract amount, and change order amounts with a brief description. The reports are on an individual project basis and do provide some information on the individual change orders and each item within that change order, and also a breakdown by area of responsibility. I'd like to point out, I think that the facility planning staff, our contractors and designers are doing a great job in controlling our change orders on each project. Any change orders that we've had are primarily due to owner requested items or unforeseen conditions, which you would expect in some of the renovations that we're now getting into. But in all cases, they have been lower than the project contingencies included in our project. So again, I think they're doing a good job. I'll be glad to answer any questions, but it's just being presented for information.
Are there any questions?
What's like the average change order per project? Is there a percentage that you would allocate?
We do. We, on, say, new construction, we'll allocate about 3% of the construction cost, and on renovations, we'll allocate about 5%. We do anticipate running into more unforeseen conditions in our existing buildings.
Get into some of those old buildings and you just find some things that you weren't expecting.
All right. If there are no more questions, moving on to item D, exemptions for formal qualification-based selection for professional services, Appendix F2, Eddie Anderson.
Thank you. Again, this is in accordance with North Carolina General Statute. The board has exempt themselves from the formal bidding or formal selection process for professionals and allowed or delegated staff to do that for them. This is for projects that are estimated to be less than $50,000. The attached list has 7 projects where we have exempted ourselves from the formal qualification process. I'd say this list would probably be maybe double that. But because of the storm, we have deferred some capital projects, and but we'll present this for your information tonight. Be glad to answer any questions.
Why is the site for J.C. Rowe called the Rowe Pre-K? Is that what the state is still having us identify that? Take off the ad, sorry.
It might be, or that might just be our mistake, but I'll correct that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Moving on to item number 8, Superintendent's Report. Item A, Student Representative, Dr. Markley.
This board, in various times in the past, has had a student rep as part of the board, and they've used different formats, is my understanding. I'd like to bring that student rep position back to the board, and I'd like to do it in a slightly different way. In the past, we've rotated from school to school. We had a different member from each one of the high schools. I would actually like a high school student who wants the position and choose one representative for the entire year. I think we'll get some, because in the past, is my understanding, and Ms. Nichols can correct me, that after a while, they sort of stopped coming. But, so I'm looking for input into this. I'd like to do it heading into next year, and maybe even do a student election where that person campaigns for that position within the schools. And it would be an ex officio position, but we need to structure it in a way that they feel like that they're involved in that process. Because I've seen in some counties where the student rep sits there, and that's not what you want out of a student rep position. So please think about that and give me some feedback on the direction you'd like to take that, and we can put together a proposal.
Would you do like a rotating school basis for a year, a semester? Is that what you're talking about?
Probably one person for 1 year, because I think if one person is that person, then they're committed to doing that, other than just somebody who thinks they come once a month to sit there and not get involved.
Right.
And just learning the process sometimes can take a month or two. So if that person is the same person, they can get into the routine of what we're doing, and I think provide some good input.
And so would you, as I said, go from school to have the representative pick? Because you're talking about an election amongst all of the schools, that could get really big and messy for the kids.
Like I said, I think how we do it, I haven't really, I'm really interested in your thoughts on, since this is your meeting, how you want that person at your meeting, but I think it's time to bring that student back.
I would be surprised if there wasn't an appetite on this board and a consensus to have a student representative. I would definitely be curious as to what exactly it would look like. I'm all
And that's
for it.
where, as I said, since this is your meeting, how you want that student to have input, we can build from there. But we haven't done it in a while, and I'd like us to take another crack at bringing that student back.
I think it's a great idea. I guess we move to vote on that now, or wait until?
Send me your ideas.
Some ideas and-
We'll craft that proposal, we'll bring it
Oh,
back,
okay, we structure it first, gotcha,
Yep.
okay.
and would probably be for next year, after, starting in August when the kids come back.
All right. Anything else?
That's it for that one.
Okay.
Item 2, we've talked about making some changes to the agenda to do a chairman's report, but we don't have that yet, so this got listed under mine, but I'll ask Ms. Eastep to pick it up from there.
Well, based on some conversations that we have had lately in regards to Title IX, we thought as a board it might be helpful to have to form a subcommittee to look at what we are doing as a system around Title IX, what we are doing to inform our teachers, our staff, and our students about Title IX, about generally about sex discrimination, about how to treat each other with respect, and treat each other equally. So I think it's a relevant conversation in this day and age, and I think it's something that we should look at. I think we're doing a good job as a system, but I think it's also something that we could and should take a look at and make sure that there isn't something that we can tweak and do better, and make sure that we are talking to our students about how they should treat each other. So we talked about forming a subcommittee, and I believe Mr. Bullier had expressed interest in serving on that subcommittee. I would also like to serve on that subcommittee, so we would have 2 board members. If any board member has any ideas about how that committee should look, or that subcommittee should look, or maybe how we should go about it, who else should be on it, or in terms of senior staff, in terms of administration, whether we should open it up to students, how we should handle that, then send that to me, or to all of us actually, by email.
So Madam Chair, you want this as an action item for the February meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like feedback. So I think it's important that we get it right and we get the right people involved. So any feedback right now, immediately?
Well, I think it's a great idea, and I would like to see not just administrative staff, but that's part of the things I'll email you.
Mm-hmm.
Also the lower level staff.
Okay. All right, moving on to item number 9, Number A, Personnel, Appendix G, Dr. Welmers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I request the board to approve the personnel matters as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Hear a motion, hear a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I have a request for Dr. Welmers. Under your hourly hire, you have someone that we're working with UNCW and Virgo, and how are we still connected? I think the new board members would need to know that we are still working with the labs, lab school in certain capacity.
Yeah, that's a child nutrition position, and we actually provide child nutrition at the school as well as transportation. So if you see a bus driver for that school or a child nutrition worker for that school, that's our employee.
So we're
We're still there.
still there.
It's a
That's
partnership.
a good thing.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols.
Nice catch.
All right. Did we actually vote on that? No, we did. All right. All those in, we did vote? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 10, old business. Item A, high school redistricting, Appendix G1, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight, we're presenting high school redistricting version 2 for your approval. Version 2 plan was submitted to the board on November 7th and most recently on January 3rd. I've included all of the detail in your packet. I'd be glad to present a summary if you'd like, but again, tonight we're asking for your approval.
Would anyone does everyone want to hear a summary, or do we want to move on to the vote? Up to the pleasure of the board.
I don't want to sound ignorant, but where within the packet? Oh, well, this is a middle school. I'm seeing all,
It's
It's on the
online.
one under
Okay,
the agenda.
all right, and I looked for that earlier, okay.
I would make a motion to approve.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Pardon? All right, opening it up for discussion.
I would like to make the same statement I made previously about the free and reduced lunch percentages. And I thought that that young man, I believe his name was Evan West, was quite eloquent, and I'm so proud of our youth because they care about these things. And he took the time to research that schools that are successful do not have that kind of overwhelming poverty situation going on. So I do think that's still a concern and that we really should look at it further, but that is my opinion.
Yeah, I think, I do share your concerns. I think with 4 high schools, I feel like we've done a lot here with version 2, and I thank the administration and the previous board, as well as the current board members who participated for their efforts. I do want to say, this is tough, and I don't take any decision I make regarding students lightly. And our community needs to know that regardless of any decision that we make on any redistricting, I personally, and I believe this board as a whole, stands ready to help and assist any student affected. We see you, we hear you, we talk amongst ourselves about all of the difficulties that you as families must be going through, and I don't want to pass any vote without you all knowing we hear you. And we appreciate all that you have gone through and all that you are going through, and I just want to thank the community for its involvement, so.
Anyone else? All right, if not, I will call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
All right.
Stephanie Adams, Member Adams, has asked me to vote in favor of high school redistricting in her absence.
She can't.
I don't think.
Yeah, I don't.
She can't delegate?
She cannot delegate.
No, that's not proper. Board member either has to be present or participating by electronic means in order to cast a vote
Okay.
under the Open Meetings Act.
We can note for the record that Ms. Adams was here at the beginning of the meeting, but had a family situation and she was unable to be at the vote.
And we can recognize in the minutes her support for the motion, even though she wasn't able to vote.
Yeah. Ms. Adams, did you get all that? Okay, thank you. All right, the motion passes. Moving on to item number B, Performing Arts Middle School, Appendix G2, Dr. Smith.
Good evening. I'd like to start by saying thank you to all of you for this opportunity to share with you the district's vision to bring to New Hanover County School a world-class performing arts high school. When you hand good people possibility, they do great things. I use this quote to help frame my presentation for this evening. What I would like to share with you is that possibility and opportunity are in front of us. The possibility and opportunity to not only bring to New Hanover County a world-class performing arts high school, but also to once again have students graduate from Williston High School. Williston is a school that has had a long, proud history in our community. I would like to simply share with you a timeline of that history because I know that I could never do justice to the importance of Williston as a school in the African American community and as an educational powerhouse in the District of New Hanover. Also, there are probably many more qualified folks in this room tonight that could do a much better job. Williston began as a freeman school in 1866 and was acquired by the school district in 1915. In 1931, it opened as an industrial high school with an emphasis on ensuring that students that attended received training in meaningful trades. Williston Senior High School opened in 1953 and was shuttered by the district in 1968, despite being a high-performing high school. Teachers and students were reassigned to New Hanover High School and Hoggart High School, which opened at that time. And the Williston that we know today was renamed and reconfigured in 1988. This evening's presentation provides the possibility and the opportunity to again have graduates of Williston High School as early as 2021. We know that as a part of this process, we must engage both parents and community in the creation of a vision for a performing arts high school. We have begun that work with a parent survey that was shared last night. We have also reached out to the staff of Williston, do a very informal survey, and asked them to share their initial concerns. And Dr. Markley is planning to meet with that staff tomorrow afternoon. Also,
Dr. Smith, can I just interject? I've
Yes,
been
sir.
asked to interject. We have also put the survey today on social media sites, and it is live on Twitter at this time. So we'll be getting some additional feedback as well.
Thank you, Dr. Holliday. Also, we have asked for curriculum recommendations from our existing arts educators throughout the district, arts educators at the high schools throughout the district. All of this is preliminary, and at the end of this presentation, I will share with you a more formal and community engagement plan. Regarding the parent survey, parents who responded indicated strong agreement in having their children attend a performing arts high school, with 61% of parents answering in the affirmative. Also, when those same parents were asked about the benefits to the community of having a performing arts high school, more than 85% answered in the affirmative. There was a 16.2% response rate. 8,082 parents were surveyed. 1,316 parents responded.
Dr. Holliday, how's that typical on our parent survey numbers?
For the short notice, it was actually pretty good. We often get a smaller return because people will say they didn't hear about it, what have you. We tried to get really out in front of this, and Ms. Quattlebaum worked really hard in getting it out on our social media sites and our website and through the traditional media. So actually, it was a pretty good return. I mean, we actually got enough numbers that it indicates that there is some interest.
As a part of our preliminary work, we have briefly examined other performing arts high schools throughout the state of North Carolina. In this slide, we've displayed their grade level configurations, student numbers, and their school performance grades. If we move forward, we would anticipate site visits and curriculum audits of these schools. And I think that was a suggestion that was made from, also from someone who spoke during the call to the audience as well. Additionally, we have been contacted by a retired teacher from Northwest School of the Arts in Charlotte who currently resides in Brunswick County, and she has already offered her experience and her expertise in this process. She has also shared that the founding principal of Northwest School of the Arts would also be willing to support the district in this work. What I'd like to do now is to share with you just some possible curriculum courses, or possible courses for the curriculum that we would be offering in the performing arts. In dance, the focus would be on learning classical and contemporary dance. We would tailor this for students who are professionally oriented toward dance. It may be that they want to pursue this post-secondary or transition directly into the professional world of dance. The emphasis would be on technique, performance, choreography, history, and production, and that would be integrated throughout the program. In regards to visual art, we would focus on creating a nurturing and developing the love of art, as well as preparing students for careers in the field. And earlier we heard about making sure that our children are prepared not only to move forward to post-secondary schools, but to access the workplace once they graduate high school. And we would focus our program on providing students with the skills and expertise and the experiences, as well as the connections to do that. We would focus on developing practical skills and exploring intellectual areas behind artistic expression, as well as developing their passion for the arts. Critical in this would be our work with the community. Many of you are aware that New Hanover is a very rich arts community, and we would work to build strong partnerships with those venues within our district. In theater, the focus would be on an immersive experience for our students. We would work to increase the awareness of contemporary issues through the study and practices, as well as awareness of careers, of careers in the field. We would ensure that our children had advanced training opportunities and understood the interrelationships between theater and other disciplines. In music, our curriculum would focus on providing students access to experiences that are innovative, performance-based projects, master classes being taught by guest artists, and thoughtful integration of contemporary topics in this work. And again, our goal would be to have our students to learn and showcase their work within our community. This specific area is one that's not found in all of the arts, performing arts programs throughout the state, but we felt that it was critical for our students based on what we know of our students now. We would include arts, media, and entertainment. In here, we would establish 4 pathways: design, visual, and media arts, performing arts production and managerial arts, and game design and integration. And here we would ensure that students had practical experiences so that they are positioned to successfully choose their chosen profession related to the arts, media, and entertainment, and that also they would be able to compete very effectively in the media, in the current media-rich world. Again, our emphasis would be on working, learning, and leading in the arts and media and entertainment fields within our community. We believe that the current facility provides the opportunity for us to relocate the New Hanover County Schools TV studio to the Williston campus. We think that this would be a way to increase the practical opportunities for practical experiences for our students. At a minimum, we would add a dance studio, recording studio. We would make upgrades to the auditorium. There are 2 stages currently on campus. There would be upgrades made there. We believe that Williston's central location is ideal, and that, again, its close proximity to community arts venues works definitely in its favor. Again, just reflecting on that very first quote that I started with, what is being proposed is definitely not without its challenges. We've heard from folks already. There's concerns about the impact on other arts programs in our high schools. We would have to engage the community as a part of this design, not just simply to involve the community, but it would have to go beyond the involvement. It would have to be engagement. Ensuring that staff is well-trained and able to ensure that our children have the types of experiences that they would need to have in order to ensure that we reach that level of world-class high school. Recruitment, our heavy lift here would be in having parents make a different decision than they otherwise would have for their middle school and high school students. And then commitment. We would have to have commitment not only from the board, from our staff, but also from the community, that this would be an endeavor that they would support long-term, and then also the costs. We've not begun that work in terms of looking specifically at the cost to bring this to fruition. But the opportunities, again, are a world-class performing arts high school in our community. Providing to our students the training, the experiences that would have them to be competitive in the world of arts as they transition from high school. We would also look to ensure flexible scheduling and personalize the schedules for students. In speaking with our Director of Secondary Education, there would be the opportunity to possibly provide some of the core content online so that students could maximize their arts elective courses. And then also in the environment, being able to attend a school that would be focused on the arts, being able to attend a school that is centrally located within our community, and being able to attend a school that is surrounded by other professional artists and professional art venues in the district would be an asset. We would, as a district, be able to increase choice options for parents. And then also, again, that strong connection with community arts programs. And then another opportunity that I think is unique is that the school currently is eligible for a Restart application. And if we were to apply for Restart and be approved by the State Board of Education, we then could look at hiring staff that maybe are not licensed in a particular area, but are highly trained. So we could look at trained professionals to provide these experiences for our students and not be limited to teacher licensure for
What we're
those
talking about
specific
there
individuals.
is something like if you had a professional from the New York Ballet, we couldn't hire a ballet teacher now because of the licensure requirements. But on a restart application, you could take somebody who's got that very, very specialized skill and use them and hire them as an artist in residence for a year.
Yes. So that flexibility would be given to us in terms of restart. As I said earlier, I was going to share with you the community engagement plan, and I have to definitely thank our public relations office for developing this very comprehensive plan. It would be our plan to work closely with parents, students, teachers, administrators, the community, the arts community, and alumni groups to ensure that we have represented the best of what our community has to offer. I know that I've said a lot in a very short amount of time, but I wanted to provide ample time for questions. So we'd be glad to entertain any questions that you might have.
Dr. Smith, I
Yes, sir.
appreciate you getting this together in a short period of time.
Thank you.
One thing that we have also been hearing about is the immersion program because of the immersion, Spanish immersion program because of the relationship to Gregory and Williston. Looking at some of the information that y'all provided to us, some of these School of Arts, or however you're calling them, actually incorporated an immersion program actually within that specialty school. Is that something that we would consider as well?
So that is not a conversation that we've had, but I don't think that that would be a limitation. I think that that would just be another opportunity to offer an additional enhancement for students.
Dr. Smith?
Yes, sir.
Have you considered, 19% of our community still lacks internet access. A lot of those people live very close to Williston. Have you considered posting these surveys in the Port City Daily or the Wilmington Journal to sort of get a wider variety of opinion from the community?
We have not at this point, but I think, again, because of the short turnaround, we wanted to at the very least have some initial input. But as the community engagement plan kind of indicates, it would be a process that would reach out several times to parents and utilize multiple media. So I definitely could see us doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a copy of the survey?
I do not. I have the results electronically. I could definitely forward those to you.
We'll forward to all board members.
Yes.
16.2% is a very small number, and you're saying you're going to reach out in social media and Twitter. That also can, I'm not trying to say anything bad, but that can be manipulated, so that's not necessarily the most valid source. Also, have you had this discussion before the last board meeting or last workshop that we brought the topic up as a whole? Have you had a discussion as administration before? Because I know I talked to Dr. Markley about a month ago about this topic, but not necessarily talking about Williston. We were discussing New Hanover, possibly Williston, other sites. Have you, until last week, or when we had that meeting, and you did pull the stuff together fast, but then this is great. I don't think anybody has any problem with the concept. Have you had this discussion before that last week?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I would say as a board, I think school creating the arts has been discussed for years. I mean, it's been something that the community has always asked for. In terms of this specific plan, I don't think y'all knew about this plan until last week.
Yes, that is
but the concept of a art school here in Hanover County has definitely been discussed. I mean, one of the things that I've looked to at the board, and I think the whole administration has talked about, is providing school choice. Mm-hmm. And this is just another one of those concepts that gives students more access to different kinds of education, and in turn, not only education, but prepares them for different avenues once they get out of school. So I think that an art school has been thrown around for a while.
That discussion has been akin to, example, the one about a CTE high school for a long time. There's been lots of discussions. I had conversation with previous art directors about how could we do this. And at some point, it takes an impetus from a board member to make that happen.
Well, has there been a discussion about comparing the different sites as opposed to just a discussion from one board member? Because we did discuss it.
Right.
And that would seem to be the beginning spot, not just taking one school, but looking at the whole community, because not only is Williston centrally located, so is New Hanover High School. And not only that, we did speak about possible other locations. So this conversation didn't take place, but the conversation about Williston has, and you proceeded from there.
So yes, and what I'll say about our arts as a whole, and I know this is a little bit of a side note, is that what we do in New Hanover County in regards to arts is, I would say, second to none in the state as a whole. And I think what this does is provides that opportunity to take it to the next level very specifically at one particular site. And I think that there is a lot of interest in regards to that, but we have not previously talked specifically about any site for this. But just looking at the survey in and of itself, when parents asked about this being a value to the community, just having, even though the sample definitely is small, having that 81% of agreement is very impressive within itself.
I totally agree about the program, but that's not what my concern is.
Dr. Smith, I would not be able to rest my head tonight in good conscience if I did not address the large elephant in the room. As a history professor, I'm constantly overwhelmed by the richness and indeed the sadness of the history of our community, and the school in particular. So I think this is a very, very interesting plan. But this simply cannot happen without that community engagement step. So I would just like to emphasize how important that is.
Yes.
And I would like the public to know, from me personally, so much of my correspondence over the past 72 hours is, what is this? And to be honest, I sort of had that reaction myself. What it is not is a final done deal. It is the beginning of a conversation with the community. It will be an open conversation. It will be an inclusive conversation. And I really want to work hard on making sure that community engagement piece is first and foremost.
Yes, I would agree completely.
And I would also like to see other sites considered, because that, to me, seems to be the beginning, is find the best site. Just picking one without exploring the others definitely seems that, here's my experience in education. Programs get started without looking at unintended consequences and enough research in the background. And unfortunately, what happens then is often they don't work. It needs to be done over time and properly in order for it, because I want it to work. My daughter went to the Durham School of the Arts, and it was fantastic, but they worked on it for years. And they did a lot of behind-the-scene communication with the whole community, and also with these different groups that are going to be tied into it, to find the best location before they even began. So this is the kind of thing that we need, is something that we know can work, but we've got to put a lot behind it before we move it forward so quickly. This is my opinion.
Yes, thank you. And I think one of the impetuses for, or part of the impetus for looking at Williston would be to have it to be restored to a high school, and that there again would be the opportunity for students to graduate from Williston High School.
The community, it's a community school, and it's so important
Yes.
to that community to have the input. But we also need the best site. Being restored to high school is great, but that might not be the best site countywide for what it is that we're trying to aim to achieve. So that's what to me, that's one thing we definitely need to look at.
And that has been a part of the conversation thus far, because if you look at that site, it is close to downtown and Thalian and Cape Fear Community College. It is fairly close to the movie studios. It is fairly centrally located to some of the, did I say Thalian? So it is located close in proximity to some of the organizations and bodies that would be, you think, interested in supporting the school itself. So that conversation, as we've gone on in this short period of time, has been a part of this.
That's an element, as it would be with other sites too.
Yeah, I think the site is excellent, actually. I think the location of the site is excellent. Like I said, we can go one of two ways here. We can begin maybe to walk down a path where we're maybe able to right some of our wrongs, some of our many wrongs in Wilmington, or we can do further injury. And I'm not willing to go down the second route. I just will not do that.
I think one question that a student or parent might have, we are allowing some students from the special schools to participate in athletics. What would happen here? Would that be a possibility for a student?
That would be the board,
We have in the
in
past.
terms of planning, would have to
We
We
decide
did the
that.
same thing with CTEC, so in terms of a specialty school, I don't think, I mean, those are things we've addressed, I think.
So if that's a concern in their survey,
Right,
they
right.
would have
We-
that.
We would, I would certainly be in favor, and this board has always been in favor of allowing CTEC, I think we did did we do WEX, was it last year, or
You've actually approved all of your specialty high schools.
allowing them to
Yes.
play sports, so that wouldn't be a hindrance to the program.
But I think that too would be something that we would look at with all of the other art schools, art high schools in the state. I would like to see what they allow.
And in some of the initial conversations that we've had, it may be that the student body is large enough to field certain teams and possibly not others. So that may be a part of the conversation as well.
Any other questions?
Well, is it a possibility to create this kind of process involving the very beginning, where you're looking at a site amongst a committee or some group that is able to garner a lot more information than we have in 1 week, and not just focus on the one site? If you want to start an arts program in this magnitude, you need to begin with the beginning.
Right, I think we
Not
have,
picking, well,
begin with the beginning, I don't think we're making a decision on the school today, I think this is in the infancy stage. I know administration has reached out to a bunch of people, and I think my understanding is the plan is to keep the conversation going, correct?
Very much so, yes.
Right, so this
I guess,
isn't a one-week
so,
plan.
since this is an action item, I guess the first piece is a performing arts school something that the board as a whole would like to explore?
that's a very rational question, not necessarily tying it to one school, though.
I would absolutely like to move forward, and as Mr. Bowyer said, I think the location, the central location of the school, relative to some of the programs that that you talked about putting there, I think that's the perfect place for that. But again, we can continue to include the community involvement, because that's important as well. So yeah, I would be in favor of moving forward with that.
Madam Chair, I guess that would have to come in some form of some kind of motion.
So are you making a motion?
I'll make the motion to continue the discussion of exploring a community art school at the location of where Williston is.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I will second that motion, like I said, with the understanding that community involvement and engagement is key.
100%.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Going to oppose?
All right,
All right, thank you very much.
thank you,
Thank you,
Dr.
Dr.
Smith.
So just so I'm clear on next steps. So we're basically putting together an exploratory committee? Okay.
And I think that committee does, as Mr. Bowyer said, need to include administration, staff, especially within our county's art, and most importantly, community members, especially some of those community members that have some, history with Williston.
Agreed. All right, moving on to old business item number C, middle school adjustments, appendix G3. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening. This is titled Middle School Redistricting Adjustments, or Middle School District Adjustments. But actually, we're going to be looking at, I'd like to look at three things that I think tie very closely together. I'd first like to give you a bond update. I think it's important before you move forward with any planning that we have a good understanding of where we are. And we'll take a look at the middle school districts. And I think at the last board meeting, the directive was to look and see what it would look like if we just moved, alleviated the overcrowding at Murray. So we're going to take a look at that. And then at the last board meeting, we were asked to look at some possibilities for implementation of a performing arts school. So in the bond update, I'd like to talk about project updates and modular units. First of all, highlight some of the projects that have been completed. Obviously, the Media Center and Gym addition at Laney and at Highgard, the cafeteria and gym addition. Both of these schools, in addition to the gymnasiums, which kind of stole all the media attention, cafeteria and media center, we did add academic classrooms, which increased capacity at both of those schools. And then Porter's Neck Elementary School. Some projects, two major projects that are underway right now, the renovations at Rolling Rice. You can tell from that picture there, it doesn't even look like the old building. So major improvements there. And there's a picture of one of the newly renovated classrooms at Myrtle Grove. Our current bond, we're really approaching the end of our current bond program. It was passed by referendum in November of 2014. These are the last three major projects that we've awarded. We've been through design on. We're actually getting ready to bid these projects. The project consists of renovations at Noble and Trask middle schools, and then additions and renovations to Wrightsville Beach Elementary School. I think the architects were here recently to give you an overview of those projects. So in the current 18-19 school year, Blair is currently at Porter's Neck Elementary School, and College Park, due to some damage at Sidbury Road site, they're currently at Castle Hayne Elementary and Holly Shelter Middle. Construction of the new school for College Park is currently underway. We've been able to expedite that project, and we currently plan to move them into their new facility over spring break. We felt like if we were going to have to move them again, that let's move them into a brand new facility. Let's not move them back to Sidbury and then move them again. Let's move them into a brand new facility. So, yes, ma'am.
How will that impact the teachers during that period of time? Someone's gonna move without the teachers' input or knowledge of what's taking place?
Absolutely
Or are you gonna
not.
ask those teachers
The teachers are aware that we're moving over spring break.
and they're not?
And
I know they're happy to get to their home.
yes, yes.
But we're not asking them to give up any of their spring break time or anything?
No, we're actually, we have actually gone through this process with the staff at Wrightsville Beach and are currently doing that, and we'll be doing that with the staff at College Park. One of the options that we came up with at Wrightsville Beach, because we're also proposing that we go ahead and move into the new Blair School over spring break. This will enable them to get their students and all of their classes together under one roof. We had some mobile units that were damaged, and the church sustained some damage. So their facilities are quite constrained right now. So this will give them the space they need to provide their program. During the week of spring break, we're allowing teachers to come in and get their classrooms set up. We're going to hire movers. They'll box things up. We'll move it for them. If they're going to be here over spring break, they can come in one day and get their classrooms set up and exchange that for the last day of the year. If they have plans over spring break, we're going to allow them to come in either the Thursday or Friday before spring break and get that done. And we'll look at doing something similar at College Park, because I know that a lot of people will have plans during that time. But so far, like you said, everyone is very excited. I think at College Park, obviously, they've been through a lot. It means a lot to that staff to get back to their school, and especially when it's a brand new school. And at Wrightsville Beach too, I think they've been surviving in mobile units in the building and the church, but I think they're very excited to get in a new facility. It's one step closer to their own project. So, it's starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Dr. Anderson, piggybacking off what Ms. Nichols said, my kids moved from Blair Elementary to the Blair at Porter's Neck. It is a real strain on these teachers. Would you consider, putting a volunteer Facebook page out on the county school website or doing something? You could put my name up there first. That is a real bear for these teachers to move their classrooms. So I would gladly volunteer, and I'd encourage the community to look at doing that as well.
Yes, and when we moved from College Park, we did that very quickly with no planning. It was a reaction. We had to. But we know we're going to move. We're going to be better prepared, and we don't expect the teachers to do that moving. This will be a much better move, a much easier move for them. We've done this quite a few times, and we made it happen at College Park after the storm, but that wasn't without some challenges. And but I'll talk to Ms. Madison about your idea, because anytime we can use volunteers, especially in setting up the classrooms, it's always helpful.
Thank you.
So along with the renovations, I wanted to look at modular units. As you can imagine, when you're doing the renovations of this size on an existing campus, we have to find swing space. So as part of the projects at Myrtle Grove, we have provided one 6-classroom modular unit and one 4-classroom modular unit. And at Roland Grice, we have a total of 4 8-classroom modular buildings. Some of these are purchased, some of these are leased, and the reason for that is depending on the next year and the next use, you'll see some of these are then, after we're done with them at Roland Grice and Myrtle Grove, we'll transition them to Noble and Trask. So the current plan, as I said, we are getting ready to bid the renovations at Trask and Noble, and the current plan is to have an 8-classroom modular unit and a 6-classroom modular unit at Trask. Those would come from Roland Grice and Myrtle Grove. And then at Noble, originally we were planning on an 8-classroom modular unit and a 4-classroom modular unit. Because of the construction of the new Blair School, we've been looking at, could we accommodate the 6th grade from Noble within the new Blair School with Wrightsville Beach. We are able to do that. So these units may or may not be needed. I will tell you, the Wrightsville Beach, we've had a meeting with Wrightsville Beach and with Noble, and we are maxing out the space in the new building. But that is without the use of these 2 mobiles. So in just summary, construction work is currently underway on Myrtle Grove and Roland Grice. Those 2 projects will finish up this summer. We're going to start work this summer at Trask and Noble, and also start at Wrightsville Beach. And again, those are the last projects in the current bond referendum. And then the modular classroom buildings we're using for the temporary swing space. Noble Middle School cannot accommodate additional students without those mobile classroom buildings.
Mr. Anderson, because you're going to be moving Wrightsville Beach out a couple months early, is the contractor able to start work on Wrightsville Beach earlier, or is that?
Yes, sir.
So will that
Yeah, we're,
expedite the timeline a little bit?
we're trying to get a little
It's,
ahead of anticipated construction cost rises, and we also lost 2 mobile units to the storm at Wrightsville Beach. This will be the first time in probably 2 decades that the students at Wrightsville Beach have been under one roof.
Yep. So, any other questions on our current bond program and construction projects? All right, let's take a look at our middle school districts. I was asked to provide a map showing a 1-mile radius around the existing middle schools. This is the current middle school plan, and you can zoom in and get a better look at this. But I think we do a pretty good job of ensuring that if you live within that 1-mile radius, you go to that school. There are certainly some exceptions, but I think most of those are where the residence is separated by a pretty major thoroughfare or landmark. The proposed adjustment would move students from Murray to Myrtle Grove, and I'm showing the area there that would be affected. There are a total of 45 students that live in those 4 study areas that are listed. And this map zooms in to the exact 4 study areas. They are the ones that are directly south of Myrtle Grove School. So they are certainly within that 1-mile radius. And it is, as shown there, study areas 317, 317A, 319, and 323.
Mr. Anderson, for the numbers that we're looking at middle schools, obviously you look at future numbers moving into the middle schools and high schools and elementary schools. What are the numbers telling you with regards to a couple years from now, 2, 3, 4 years from now, the populations in our middle schools? Will they be dramatically increased, decreased, or remain fairly stagnant of where we are right now?
I think our middle schools, our middle school population are a lot like gas prices. They just went up really fast when we had the 5th grade population come into 6th grade. They will not go down quite as quickly.
But once that bubble gets through,
even when that bubble gets through, they're not going to drop to the levels that they were.
Gotcha.
So in our middle schools and in our secondary schools in general, we're going to be in this for a good 5 to 10 years.
I'm probably missed something here. Okay, now you've got the Murray to Myrtle Grove total number of students moved, and is this within the mile? I'm sorry, I think I missed a step here.
Okay.
You had the mile radius, and there were a couple students.
Well, the 1-mile radius map was just something that the board asked to see, so it's not necessarily related to this. I think the intent here is that, let me go forward one more. You can see, looking at the existing capacity numbers, Murray Middle School is over 1,000 students this year. And at Murray Middle School, we've done some things to accommodate them. We've taken some computer labs, we've taken a weight room, and we've set up a classroom in their media center. So it's important to reduce that population. As Mr. Wortman said, going forward, we saw a very quick increase. Going forward, we may see a slight decrease each year, but for them to really manage and teach effectively, we think we need to move these students from Murray to Myrtle Grove. In this particular plan, again, it's 45 students, 4 study areas that are adjacent to Myrtle Grove. It would bring the projected membership from 1098 to 905 for next year, and it would be 137 over. And at Myrtle Grove, their projected membership would be 836. That'd be 114 students over. So, it's like I said before. It doesn't. We're not redistricting, and this proposal doesn't solve overcrowding. It helps us get through this time where we know our secondary schools are going to be crowded.
And if you go back to the map, Eddie, of those 4 districts, they are literally across the street from the red flag there is Myrtle Grove Middle School.
So they're right there anyway.
So even if we're not we don't have a formal 1 mile, but they're gonna be,
No, it's good. I understand now. I was just, my brain skipped something, and now I'm fine.
I was the one who actually asked him to look at, because this issue had come up a few months ago about looking at that 1 mile radius for elementary school. And so I'd asked Mr. Anderson to look at that 1 mile radius for middle school.
Any questions on the middle schools? All right. So moving forward with the performing arts, I think we talked about it. We all agree that there needs to be a planning process, and the 1920 school year would be a planning year. In looking at that process, that planning period, we looked at really 5 options. During that first year, we could move no students, or we could move 6th grade out of Williston and temporarily assign them to Holly Shelter and Roland Grice Middle School. I have plus or minus a 50-50 split, and I'll show you the numbers for each of these. So these are 2 possibilities for that first year. 3 other possibilities for the following year. We looked at moving 6th grade, moving 6th and 7th grade, and moving all 3 grades. I get to this later in the presentation, but when we look at implementation and we know what the construction requirements are going to be, we're going to need to have the discussion of whether we phase in construction and leave as many students at Williston as possible, whether we relocate the entire population and try to get construction done as quickly as possible, or we try to do something in between. And it's really too early to make that decision, but those are the things that we need to start thinking about and start planning towards.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes, sir.
Say temporary reassignment. If you were to reassign the 6th grade, I think the slides that you're going to get to later show that there's space. The reason why you picked those schools is there's adequate space to accommodate moving 6th graders from Williston. But you use the word temporary, but likely if we decide to move forward with the performing arts school, a vast majority of those 6th graders that are moved to Roland Grice or Holly Shelter will actually end up permanently at Holly Shelter. So it's not that you would temporarily assign them and then assign them again. There's the potential that they actually stay at those schools, correct?
There is that potential.
Right.
But I think you'll see in these numbers that, keep in mind, we started redistricting to reduce our middle school numbers. And, at some point we still need to do that. And so, obviously, some of those middle school students may come back to Williston. We have other middle school students from other schools that may decide to go to the Performing Arts School at Williston. And we have plans for a new middle school. So, depending on the timing and funding.
Come back to Williston. If
Well,
you decide to keep it as a middle school, come back to Williston, is that what you mean?
No, if there's a rising sixth grader
Right.
that is assigned to Holly Shelter, and whenever the arts program
Oh,
is
oh, they
is
choose to-
implemented,
they choose to
they
come
may
back.
choose to
Choose to
come
come
back.
back. Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm
And,
just,
and then we have a new middle school that is planned but is not funded. So, you know, I understand it's kind of, it's temporary, but we don't have a defined time period at this point because of those issues.
Just for clarification, we've agreed we need to study the issue, and this becomes part of that study. The only thing we're going to really look at tonight in terms of an action item is the Myrtle Grove and Murray piece.
Right, that's correct. This is just for your information. We're not asking for any approval.
If we were to go ahead with the redistricting plan for middle schools, as we are now, without the situation as far as looking at what's going on in Williston as a possible art school, there wouldn't be any open spaces in Holly Tree or, I use Holly Tree as an example because we're talking, part of our fourth plan for the middle school redistricting would have Holly Tree capacity, correct?
Holly Shelter.
I mean, Holly Shelter, I don't know,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I think that we're talking
I
about.
knew
Holly
what you
Tree.
meant.
Yeah, well, Holly Shelter would be at capacity if we continued on the middle school redistricting plan. That's the fourth one we're looking at now?
Well, our middle schools, as a district, we have more students than we have seats based on capacity.
Right.
So, you know, obviously, we are able to, to accommodate, some number of students over capacity.
Okay.
But it's less and less ideal the more students that is. But what the point is, we have more students than we have seats based on capacity. So in no plan, we're trying to fill the schools to the best of our abilities and make use of available space.
Thank you.
So option 1 and 2, again, these are two possibilities for next year. Option 1 is we don't move any of the Williston students. And what I want to show here is really that we're 538 students over capacity. That'll jump to 954. Keep in mind that, and that's why I put this in red down there. We were trying to get the exact number of students from Virgo and pull them out of that number. We haven't done that yet. So, we've been estimating all along in middle school redistricting that number is about 100. But we're gonna define that. So that 100 plus or minus is in that number still. So that's probably more like around 800, which would be typical to the growth we're seeing year to year in our middle schools. So in the next option, we would be moving the seventh, we would be,
that's option 3.
yeah. Where? Yeah, so in option 2, we would be moving the 6th grade from Williston to Holly Shelter and Roland Grice. So the 7th and 8th grades would remain at Williston. And to make this possible, we did a couple of things. The capacity at Roland Grice, to make this happen, we currently plan to leave one 8-classroom modular building at Roland Grice. We would simply leave a second one. And then we would also, I changed the Noble capacity based on their use of Blair. So based on their use of Blair, that capacity goes up to 780. And I've given you those calculations. I will say the reason we're doing that at Noble, keep in mind, is during that same year, we're going to be renovating. So we will be required to vacate probably 8 to 10 classrooms during each phase as we move through the construction project. So those are the two options for the next school year, or the two possibilities for the next school year. The next three options are all the same, and I said these could be implemented as early as 2020-21. It's leaving the sixth grade at Holly Shelter, or leaving 7th and 8th at Williston, moving the 6th grade, leaving 8th grade only, and moving 7th and 8th, and lastly, an option that moves all students out. And so you can see under each one of these options, what the population, or how that would affect the projected membership and their capacity. In these, I did the same thing with the Roland Grice capacity and leaving 2 8 classroom modular units. But at Noble, since Riceville Beach will be gone starting the 2020-21 school year, I've now included the entire school of 544 students and added that to the 680 student capacity for Noble, which gave us a capacity of 1,224. So I know that's a lot of information, and that's why it's provided for information. I think it's something that you can take, you can look at, ask questions. Feel free to give me a call. I think regardless of a timeline for this project, I think we do need a planning year. We develop a program. Once a program's developed, we can really look at what the facility needs are to implement that program, and then we can do an assessment of Williston to determine what improvements are needed. We know some improvements will obviously be needed, but we really don't know the extent of those improvements until we define that program. We would then develop a design narrative, develop cost estimates and budgets. The budgets would include funding for design, construction, furniture, fixtures, equipment. I expect that we will be adding to that category as well. And then just in general, I think with planning, design, construction, it's a 2 to 3 year process depending on the scope of work and how it's implemented. Again, this could be, you could look at phasing in construction, and or you could look at relocating the entire student population or relocating part of the student population. But I think these are all the things that will be discussed during that planning time.
Mr. Anderson, if we do agree to go forward with a performing arts school, and let's say it is 2 years away from actually opening up, if we decided to move the incoming 6th grade class to Roland Grice and Holly Tree, by utilizing the facilities that are available at Roland Grice and the capacity that we have available to us at Holly Tree, we're not overburdening our middle school system at that point by using that, correct? Because of that additional space that we have. And then the reason why I ask that is if you say you're 2 years away, you're moving 6th graders into Williston, and then 2 years later you actually have to move them out of Williston. So to me, if we were going to do that, it would make more sense to allow those 6th graders to go to their permanent middle school instead of allowing them to or not forcing them to move, but telling them, well, we're going to move you either in a year or 2.
Well, I would, Holly Shelter has a capacity of 918. If we moved the 6th grade to Holly Shelter and Roland Grice, that's a projection of 1055, so there are 137 students over capacity. that's not too bad. At Roland Grice, they're under capacity, but that's with the additional 8 classroom modular unit.
That
I
are
think
there right now, correct?
But I think the more important number to look at there is also keep in mind the 970. And I bring that up because it's important, obviously, to have classroom space. But at some point, adding classrooms to existing schools begins to overburden the core spaces and the infrastructure. Do we have adequate size kitchen and cafeteria space? Do we have adequate restroom facilities, parking, and so forth? So I'm not saying that we have done that by moving the 6th grade, but I'm saying at some point that's what we would, we would.
Could I go back to, here I go again, going back to the mile radius around. This is what the movement between Myrtle Grove and Murray was, correct? When you showed the updated chart?
Let me pull that particular one
I
up.
think we did that to specifically move some students from Murray to Middle Grove.
About the mile radius?
Well, I don't think that had anything to do with the mile radius. The consideration was we needed to move some of the students from Murray to Middle Grove because of the severe overcrowding at Myrtle Grove.
Yeah.
It looks like some parts may be outside the mile radius, but I think there's some neighborhoods in there that are maybe being developed as the,
Right over
323 looks like. So I don't think the mile consideration was that, but I think it was more intended, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Anderson, to address overcrowding at Murray to put them at Myrtle Grove, correct?
They're really
That was
two,
not the mile radius, okay.
yeah, really two unrelated issues. I just
I
had
guess
them,
now
I had them together there, and I
Just happened to
apologize.
fall that way.
I apologize for the confusion, but
You're going over a lot of stuff, you're doing a great job.
as Dr. Markley said, tonight, the only action that we're asking you to take is for next year, for the 2019-20 school year. We're asking you to approve relocating these 4 study areas. I've got them highlighted there, 317, 317A, 319, and 323. We're asking for your approval to redistrict those from Murray to Myrtle Grove.
I mean, they're right around the corner. I mean, they can walk to school just about.
I would make that motion to approve moving those 4 study areas from Murray to Myrtle Grove Middle School.
Dr. Anderson, Murray is over 1,000 students
Yes, sir.
over capacity.
No, sir.
Oh,
Is
no,
it-
it's 1,098, so I'm sorry. So,
Total.
It'd be 2,000 if it was that far over.
That'd be amazing.
That'd be bigger than our high school.
Can you just briefly explain the impact of moving only 45 students?
Well, 45, if we can,
Hundreds over capacity?
we're really not anticipating we think the big influx of students at Murray happened this year. This year to next year, we don't anticipate as big of influx of students. If we can reduce it to 45 and gain 2 of those classrooms back that we took away, we think that's a good thing.
Okay.
Can I have a request?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, hang on, I'm sorry, for
I'm
one
sorry,
second.
okay.
We
I
have a
have
motion on
second.
the floor.
Oh,
Is there a
sorry.
second?
I didn't
You
start
seconded?
off.
Okay, all right.
Okay, yes, sorry
Okay,
about
sorry.
that. Yes.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You can
I'm
start.
sorry.
Oh, well,
I
you
didn't
didn't
hear
finish the motion,
second.
it had nothing to do with that.
We made the motion, Jeanette seconded
I
it, so
didn't
now
hear
we're
the
open for
second.
discussion.
My
Oh, okay.
apologies.
No,
Go
that's,
ahead.
yeah, yeah.
You're good.
Okay. What I was going to ask, which is sort of tied into it, is the fact that you brought this to us today. I would like to see a mile radius situation with, say, the situation at Roland Grice, because even though you say there's major barriers, could we say how many students that would affect if we put them within that mile radius? Because that is a concern. These students, even though they've got barriers, they are still walking to that school. And it's like this, if you know, you can practically see the school, and yet since you've got a big highway in the way, you send them way off on a bus.
So the only students that are outside of the or within the 1 mile radius are the students that are on the opposite side of Oleander. And it's primarily commercial space. Currently, I think there were some parents that were asking to stay at Rolling Grace because we were proposing to move them. This plan does not move them.
Okay, the ones on Pine Grove within
Pine
8.8.
Street, yeah,
Pine
that's
Street.
not, that's
The
unaffected
only
with this,
thing we're
what we're
moving is
doing.
this, is the.
Yeah.
Right, this right here, right now.
This has nothing to
Right.
do with, yeah.
Right.
This is solely, everything else, we won't address anything else today, simply Murray to Myrtle Grove.
Because the decision matrix at this point becomes, the committee has to look at, is an art school at Williston something that's viable and doable? Before we even begin to look at any student movements that would go with that. So you've got to get through step one before we do that. So all we're asking tonight are these 4 areas related to Myrtle Grove.
And that's it.
That's it.
Okay, that's easy.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Again, thank you for your time, and I know that's a lot of information, but, call me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, I would say that with the Williston proposal, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but, you know, since we are forming a committee at some point in the near future, I'd like to have a public forum to hear from the actual community about that. And I don't know when the appropriate time to schedule that would be, but it seemed.
Madam Chair, if you'll give me two board members to help get this committee together, then we can get rolling.
Do I have 2 volunteers? Well, I think Mr. Wortman is
Wortman one,
volunteering.
And I would think
Do I hear his
Ms.
two?
Justice, just because you voted no to protect those interests would be the other one.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Guys, if you'll give me your schedule next week.
Thank you very
We'll
much
We'll
for
have to get
stepping
back to the
forward.
workshop.
Well, we'll be at the same one, so.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. You are under new business. Do you want to stay up there, or you want to do those from your seat?
Oh, I have to get back to my paperwork here.
All right, so item A, easement and conveyance agreement with Cape Fear Public Utility Authority for the new College Park Elementary School, Appendix H.
Yes, thank you. We're asking for your approval of the easement tonight. This is part of the College Park Elementary School project. The easement's to Cape Fear Public Utility Authority, and it will allow them access to maintain the water, fire, and sewer lines serving our new building. This is a pretty typical and standard easement request given any project of that size.
So moved.
A second. Wait a second.
Was this just for, this is under new business, so do we,
This is new business approval,
can approve it
because
tonight.
we're asking for your approval tonight so that we can move forward since time is of the essence.
okay. All right, discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved.
Just for new board members, anything you see in the new business is only there because it's the first time you're seeing it. It doesn't mean you can't take action on it at that time.
All
And,
right, item B, easement agreement with the City of Wilmington for the new College Park Elementary School, Appendix I.
This is a very similar agreement to the easement you previously approved. This easement is to the City of Wilmington. As part of construction, we have built a sidewalk that extends along the front property line. This easement will contain the sidewalk and allow the city to assume long-term maintenance responsibilities for it. We ask for your approval tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Do I hear any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. All right, moving on to item number 12, correspondence. Item A, North Carolina School Boards Association, and that's me. Sift through all my papers here. I believe you all received this via email, this email that we received back, the old board received back in November, and I just wanted you all to be aware of it. I believe the time has come and gone to reply to it. In the past, I think we've received this how many times?
The school boards, you pay a dues to the School Boards Association, but they also have a separate lobbying arm which they ask districts to participate in. That's the invoice you saw there. This board traditionally in the past has chosen not to participate in that particular piece. So while it's the time that has passed, it's an item that'll come up every year, and it's really up to your decision as a board. Do you want to give $6,000 to the lobbying arm of the School Boards Association?
Well, a big chunk of our money comes from the legislature, and we have not been doing well the last decade practically, because apparently we haven't been able to get the legislature to see what our needs were in a healthy way. So you may object to the $6,000, but I happen to think it would be a good idea to have another voice up there, our voice, trying to get educational funding for a lot of projects that have been.
Yeah, they have a lobbyist regardless of whether you pay the $6,000 or not. Leanne, the winner is their permanent lobbying.
So what you're saying is an extra one?
This allows them to do certain, the way it's structured, they can do more specific advocacy than they can under their school board structure.
Oh, well, see, I didn't.
For those who go next Thursday and Friday to core training,
Yeah.
they will definitely give you a briefing on this.
Yes.
But it doesn't prevent them from doing lobbying, but it does, this has a different, there's a 501c3B or D or whatever letter there. This operates slightly different from that.
Can we wait and vote on this until after we get back so we can get more information, because we're gonna be right in the thick of all this information?
Well, we're heading into budget season, so if we want to do this, it'll be something we can add into our budget for
That's
next
a
year.
month away, yeah.
Yep.
They're gonna advocate for you to spend the money.
Yeah.
Because that's how,
Definitely.
And how much do we,
As a practical political matter, you know, coming from a political science background, I think there's probably some value there. I'd like to take a look at it and, yeah.
Mary Hazel, how much do we pay to them every year? Do you know?
It's done by size, so as we're number 11 in the state, so it's in about the $18,000 range.
I thought it was 20
I was
some.
24, but-
Yeah, I thought it was 24,
What would be with the
26.
6,000?
what?
We will,
With the 6,000 then.
we'll be happy to, we'll send you the actual invoice for the straight dues.
We do
Yeah.
pay for, we do already pay them, so it's
Yes.
not like
We
we're
do.
not.
Oh, wait a minute.
We
Oh,
pay them
yeah.
a substantial
All right,
amount.
yeah, let me
we
think
do.
about that again.
This is not the only
Okay.
invoice that we get, so I do want to make that
So
clear.
this isn't $6,000
No,
to.
this is 6 plus.
Okay.
No, we have been, and every district in the state is a member.
Yeah.
This is an additional advocacy piece.
You'll hear next week as to why they want the money.
I feel like I need to know more information.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
And that-
can we put it off
yeah.
a month?
There really isn't a decision on this. We got the letter. The old board has chosen in the past not to fund this, but we felt with 4 new members that you needed to at least see it as we're heading into budget season. Because
And, sorry, and you were gonna be going to core training, and I figured somebody would maybe talk to you about it.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure that you knew we do pay
Okay.
dues every year. This was something that came up, I want to say like maybe 2 years ago.
About
for the
3 years
first-
old,
yeah.
yes.
And, you know, as Dr. Markley said, we've declined to pay it in the past, because we felt like what we've contributed was enough.
And those
So-
resources can go other places.
Right. We would,
Well,
we
I-
wanted the resources to stay in our county.
Well, I like Nelson, I have a background in political science, I've taught that too, and so, our government, and so, we're looking from a little different perspective as far as what the effect can be on these legislatures that control so much of our budget. That's.
Well, I'm aware of that as well, but
I know
I'm
you-
just
but-
not sure that, you know, knowing what they do, just
like
not
to
sure
find
what our 6,000 would buy us. So, maybe they'll explain a little bit more about that when we go up there
Part of
tomorrow.
politics is counting to 4, so if there's no support for it,
Right.
so, I'll look at it, but.
Right.
We'll find out. We might totally.
All right,
I think Mr.
I
Boyer has an.
actually have
That's something else.
I have a couple of small
Yeah.
things first. The digital literacy licensing requirements, which is something I'm glad I only have to say once, are really I've talked to several educators, they're really, you know, their ability to get that training, that 20 hours is proven difficult. I know we offered one shot at it last year in April or May, but I've talked to several educators who are requesting that we look at providing that training here in New Hanover County. We have several instructors who can do it. You know, just at least an 8-hour shot somewhere.
We actually provide digital literacy training throughout the year. We do it in a couple of ways. One, we do a summer conference. It's every summer, that's technology focused. And it's not actually 20 hours done, it's how many hours? It's 1 credit Of the 15 they gotta have, it's 1 hour. 2 10s, which would be 20. But we do, through our technology department, they're offering continual credit opportunities to get credit. And I'll let Don speak to that.
What we've done is, the people, because this is the first year, those who renew at the end of this year, we've actually are looking back. They can request us to look back at their transcript and go back and change things that weren't digital literacy to digital literacy. There's a form they fill out, and I've been doing that. We've had quite a few people who have requested that, and we've honored those requests as long as it's something that kind of fits in. We are being more lenient.
Some of their credits?
If they have something in
Yes.
their past that was digital before the
Then-
requirement, we can reclassify it.
And we've done that. And then there's lots of opportunities. We have badges, we have Summer Institute, individual schools are doing training, and then there's other workshops we've done, there's conferences that people have gone to. We've actually sent out an email to principals and media specialists with a whole list of opportunities that teachers have for gaining that credit.
We'll be happy to share
But
that
I'll
with you.
gladly send that to
Please.
you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. And I've received a correspondence from the Wilmington Health Board. The Wilmington Health Board sent, I believe it was this past board, Chairman Higgins, some information regarding teen health, specifically mental health, just identifying crisis points. It's free to all of our educators, all of our staff, lunch ladies, bus drivers, everything. They'd really like to investigate a partnership with our school system, and this is something I think we should take a look at.
Sure.
I have a letter that I'll distribute to the rest of the board, but I definitely want to look at this at our next meeting. I don't know if it could be part of in-service training or what. Not that they don't have enough to do. So. And finally, Blair Elementary School is participating in a challenge with Francis Weller. At this time, I will be doing it, and I would ask able board members to do a squat in honor of Blair, in support of Blair Elementary School.
Go for it, youngins. All you young people, with good knees. I don't want to end up with my knee replaced. It's already got an issue. Sorry, guys, believe it or not, I have valid health reasons. I do not do that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the board's support on father issues.
And you do realize that some people do not want to end up, I would end up in the hospital if I did just one. Not in the hospital, but on steroids.
That's why I said able board member. Yeah,
Well, I'm
I
not
get it.
crippled, I just don't do that.
I will remind you that I did break a hip. I did break a hip.
Oh, that's right.
You
Well,
know,
hip's not the knee.
You haven't been on a ladder since, right?
No,
Good.
God, no.
Don't hurt yourself.
All right, thank you for that little bit of exercise,
There we
that
go.
was great.
Absolutely,
Yes.
my
Hot
pleasure.
room.
Okay, yes, in a hot room,
Yeah, right.
It is hot.
yes. And I'm assuming maintenance has been called, Mr. Anderson? Wonderful. All right.
I was noticing, is the HVAC good?
It's 78
It'll get cold
outside.
tomorrow,
Just want you to
so-
feel the same
All
inside.
right, moving on to item number 13, announcements. New Hanover County Board of Education will attend the New Hanover County Schools Legislative Luncheon on Thursday, January 17th, 2019 at noon in the Board of Ed Center, which is right here. The next regular meeting of the New Hanover County Board of Education is scheduled for Tuesday, February 5th, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. in the Board of Ed Center. And again, thank you to everyone. I think Principal Holland has left, but I don't know if I can't remember if I thanked her for the wonderful refreshments, but thank you to everyone for the all the wonderful gifts. They're very well
Thank you.
appreciated. Now, moving on to item number 14, closed session. I ask that there's a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318, 11A36.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Just one item, it'll be very brief.
Great.